What is selling exactly? I think at some level we have to agree that it involves some level of influence, influencing someone, convincing someone to make a decision in our favor rather than in the favor of a competitor, which of course opens up the whole idea of the psychology of human interaction. In this week's podcast, I interview Robin Burr, and we deep dive into the psychology of influence. And it just might change the way you look at selling. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. So good to have you alongside. It is your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. Well, your sales training brain at the very least. And I want to ask you, if you've got a moment, like, subscribe, follow the podcast. Hope you'll make it part of your regular conversation. Share it with somebody, especially today's episode where I'm joined by Robin Burr. Had Robin on like 15 months ago. Just can't get enough of this guy. He's got so much good material, and we want to get into it again today. Robin, welcome to the show.
I am grateful to be back. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
Yeah, man, it is good to have you. Of course, you can tell right away Robin's not from around here. He's a London, England guy, and the stuff that he has on LinkedIn is amazing. If you're not following Robin Burr on LinkedIn, go do it right now. Guy's content is absolutely stunning. And it makes you think. That's what I like in content. But you talk a lot, Robin, about influence. You talk a lot about psychology. You've been called a sales therapist. I find that to be really, really interesting. But when you start talking about selling and psychology or influence, people often think you're venturing off into the realm of manipulation or conning people or, whatever the case may be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it took me quite a long while to embrace using the word persuasion or even influence within content on my conversations, because immediately when you say persuasion, people think that's a bad thing. Persuasion is a dirty word, and it shouldn't be used, and people don't like to be persuaded. So it took me a while to kind of get over that myself. But I've embraced it because I think that the way I look at it is that the difference between persuasion and maybe what we might call manipulation is the intent of the operator. Sure. So, I've changed the way I think about persuasion. I think a lot of people need to change the way they think about persuasion, because if you carry that negative connotation with you, it's going to show up in all sorts of unhelpful habits when you're trying to win business and do deals,
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, what I find to be interesting about that conversation is people, I often ask when I'm training people, hey, is this manipulative? And they look at me like, well, yeah, kind of. I go, well, of course it is. Of course it's manipulative. We manipulate all day long, every day. When I want to go eat somewhere with my wife and I want to go to my place, well, I try to steer the conversation my way. Isn't that manipulation? But to your point, the difference between a manipulator or a con artist and a great salesperson is a pretty thin line. It's just called character or ethics. It's intent. What are you trying to accomplish? But I find that whole conversation to be interesting simply because the vast majority of salespeople, Robin, will say, well, first you have to build a relationship. Why? Why are you building a relationship? Because you want them to trust you. Why do you want them to trust you? So that you can influence them to purchase something. I mean, if you follow it linearly, you're going to get there regardless.
Yeah, like people say you should build a relationship. That they're often thinking about it as this nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. But if you're looking to build a relationship with someone just so that you can, sell them something? Right. Well, then you are manipulating them, aren't you? You're just doing so in a soft way. And you're doing so, but kind of denying it yourself.
Right. Because we get this feeling that, ooh, that's not a good thing. That's sort of lacking in whatever integrity or character. So I always start off with a definition of selling. It's interesting. if you talk to people and ask them their definition of selling, it's like a lot of words in business, leadership or culture or whatever. You get a lot of different answers. But to me, selling is simply the art and the science of influencing people to make a decision to buy from you in the presence of competition. The reason I need to influence you is because there are other people trying to influence you. So I need to be effective. I need to get better at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly how I define it. A slight change I make is that it's influencing a decision to change.
Yes.
And of course, it's inferred that you'll change with me if I'm a good solution for that. But the first sale that you make to someone is them deciding that they've got to do something different about their situation. They have to um, uh, change the way they run their organization, or who they hire, or what technology they use, or who they vote for, or who they date. That's the first sale. The second thing is the solution. That's the
Right.
second sale that I feel that you make. But yeah, I'm with you. It's to influence a decision. So we need to know about influencing. We need to know about how decisions are formed, and we need to know about how people inherently change, because it's one of these things that people resist, right? People resist change.
No doubt. And many times I'll say, hey, your biggest competitor is actually not the other guy, the other vendor. Your biggest competitor is change because of how
Yeah.
difficult it is for the human brain to navigate to something different when you're very satisfied or comfortable with a certain solution, even if it's not the best solution. I mean, how often, Robin, do you run into scenarios where people say, listen, what you're selling is better than what I have, but I'm gonna stand pat on on this solution, even though it's not quite as good as what you have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happens all the time. Yeah, and there's lots of reasons. There's reasons why people are trying to protect part of their psychology or their identity by doing that. That sometimes we, as salespeople, we look at someone doing that, and our first instinct is, how irrational is that? How illogical? I've got to prove to this person that they're wrong. I've got to prove to this person how my solution is better, and all of that starts this journey of being unknowingly combative to how people make decisions, which is why if you just try to fight someone's opinion with facts and logic, it's a net loss every time.
that's really profound, isn't it? I mean, so many times you see salespeople that they believe that if I can just give you more information, more
Yeah,
data, more facts, then you'll come around to my way of thinking, which,
yeah,
by the way, I have a conflict of interest because when you come around to my way of thinking, I get paid.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
It's a
the whole sending more information. Let me try and give you more, and we'll probably unpack this later. But all it does is just put pile upon pile of cognitive overload, which is what stops people making decisions. At least the ones that they feel are really right for them. If they're going to take action, if they're going to do something and go at it hard, like own the decision, not feel like they were coerced into something. They need to make it from a different place than we come from when we're just trying to show them statistics and data and case studies and all of this kind of other garbage that we're told we should put in our presentations.
sure. I think fundamentally the profession of selling, salespeople in general, very generalized, tend not to be very well liked. They kind of rank up there with politicians and attorneys and
Yeah.
those kinds of things on the trust meter of how much we trust people. But why is that? Why do you think, Robin, that salespeople continue to act and perform and behave in ways that lead to people having a negative impression of them when we know what causes it? Why does it continue to happen? Now, in my lifetime, 3 decades plus of selling, things really haven't changed much. Why is that?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. So you're absolutely right on. So there's this statistic I read somewhere, and I think it was from the book "To Sell Is Human" by Daniel H. Pink. I think
Hmm.
it's about, but someone can fact check me on that. But I saw this statistic somewhere that was that 83% of salespeople don't enjoy the sales process. So they don't approve, or they don't like the sales training techniques, strategies they've been told. There's something within 83%. That's an enormous amount of people who are
Right.
basically, as they, you know, pitch or do outreach or handle objections, as they do their thing, there's a part of them that's going, this don't feel right. Something feels off. And so the question is, if so many people don't, and I'm going to assume that that's not actually too far from the truth. There's going to be a lot of people out there selling, and there's a little part of them, because I know there was with me, going, something about this is off. Something doesn't feel right. This can't be the best way, and yet you'll continue to do it. And I think at the heart of it, it's if you're going to stand up as the person who says, I'm not going to do it this way, when every other person in your organization is, you leave yourself really vulnerable. You leave yourself very, like, you got to really bet on yourself and back yourself that you know a
Right.
better way. If you're going to be the one in 100 reps that says, I ain't going to do it like everyone else, I'm going to do it my own way, then you've got to be pretty sure, because that you're going to get pressure from your sales manager or your organization. Everyone else is going to say you're stupid. This is the way we've always done it. If you've heard that, which I'm sure you have, we've always done it this way. To
Sure.
be the guy or girl that stands up and says, well, I think it's stupid, I'm going to do it the way that I think's better, a lot of people just crumble. They'd rather do what keeps them safe, right? Because that's how you keep a job. And I certainly did that. I thought, if I can stay mediocre enough, I'll have a job. Of course, I wanted to succeed, but where I was in that place was I was a mediocre salesperson that was employed. If I start trying to do something different and I fail, I might lose my job. So I'll
Sure.
continue doing what's safe. We squash ambition. We squash rational and critical thinking in sales just to do what is, as you say, just mediocre. And it takes a certain type of person to say, nah, fuck this. I'm going to do it the way I think is best and
Absolutely. Yeah,
succeed, you know?
absolutely right. Well, stay with us. Coming up next, I'm going to talk to Robin about some of that advanced buyer psychology that he talks about a lot. I think you're going to learn some things. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show. Welcome back, Sales Untraining. Thanks for joining me in a conversation with Robin Burr as we talk about psychology and influence. Not the kind of topics you typically run into in most sales training. Typically, you're learning tactics like, how to close and handle objections and things of that nature, which I've always said, Robin, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to learn how to close or handle objections if you're talking to the wrong person at the wrong time with the wrong message and the wrong solution. You can be the greatest closer in the world. Probably not going to help you a whole lot, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we learn all of these skills to help us deal with pushback. Like, is there not someone saying, should we, stop creating resistance in people in the first place, and we wouldn't have to assume that objections are going to come up. Like, there's a little bit. I think you should always learn how to handle concerns. They're always going to come up, but there's
Sure.
so much emphasis put on the wrong the wrong end of selling, right?
Yeah, I think you hit on a point there that bears some investigation. Salespeople create their own resistance, don't they? Just
Yeah.
simply because they ignore human psychology in the approach. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of the problems we run into, yeah, I think we create our own mess, and then you'll pay money to someone like me to teach you how to deal with that mess. I'll tell you how to stop doing the stupid shit, but there'll be other people that try and give you a quick solution to that. Like, here's another line of script, or here's another technique or another tactic, and they can be useful. But it's like, should we deal with the root cause? Like, what happened just before this deal went south, or this conversation started to wobble? Like, have you thought about that? And people don't want to do that. They just want to, what do I say? What do I do when this happens? So I think we've got to
Right. Give
change.
give me a plug and play, paint by numbers approach that I can just
We
reach
want the
into the
silver
playbook.
bullet, right?
I want a
Yeah.
silver bullet. That's exactly right. Well, based on all of your observations and what you're doing now, if you went into a sales team today, well, let's say you do as a consultant all the time, but let's just say you took over a sales team. What would be some of the first things you would address that would help move the sales team in a different direction in your view? Maybe eliminate some of that easy resistance that, we could just take care of right away.
Yeah. Um, I would with new hires, I would completely strip them of product knowledge or product training for the first probably 30 days, or at least
Wow.
for the first 2 weeks to 3 weeks. I would get them to listen to calls. I'd get them to understand the marketplace. I'd get them to understand the problems that the product or service solves. But I'd get them to be an observer of the marketplace, and not just the marketplace like at a strategic kind of fluffy level, but actually like looking at customers' businesses and how they work, so that after a while that becomes their comfort zone, right? The
Right.
thing that they will fall back on will always be about the customer, about the conversations and the problems. Then I'd bring in bit by bit, little bit. Um, with an established team, I think I'd get them selling a completely different product.
Wow.
I'd say let's take all of these guys. Let's take like where you can. You'd have to phase this, right? As you know, you can't just rip all of your good people off the phones. But I'd want to benchmark their actual real salesmanship or salespersonship by taking them away from marketplace. Because if they're any good, they should be able to sell a completely different product in a completely different market,
Sure.
and that will separate, who has actually got the core skills to
Right.
succeed, without relying on tenure or how well they can talk about their company. So strip all of that out and let's see how they can actually just engage. I think that would be something I'd do. Have done.
Yeah,
Have done. Yeah.
I've never understood this, is that companies will start off with that product training, Robin, and they will tell the manager or the trainer will tell the salespeople why our products are so good, why
Yeah.
our customers buy them, why we're different. I've never understood that. If you really want to understand why your products are bought and who buys them and why, send them out to talk to real customers and get
Yeah.
it from the horse's mouth, as it were,
Yeah.
instead of some
Yes.
trainer guy, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'd do. For 2 weeks, I'd say, find 10 of our customers and sit down and do what's called, you probably come across this, a jobs to be done interview. That kind of almost like you're gathering a testimony or a case study, but you're coming at it from a clean slate. So, why did you buy it? What was the problem you had before you bought? How did you make that decision? What were the concerns about it? Like where you can, those conversations can teach a new hire much more than your marketing department's, brochure or company slide deck. It's
Absolutely.
because now you can bring it in, you give it the thing that a lot of salespeople miss in their training, which is context. They walk out of a classroom full of content,
But
full
no
of the
context.
stuff, but they don't have any context about why it's important, why it's relevant, or even like you say, is it important? Is this
Yeah,
point important?
I really love asking salespeople, why should I buy from you? I'm a prospective client. I need what you have. I've got three choices, maybe four, all good companies. I know they're good because they're in business. If they weren't good, they probably would be circling the drain or out of business. So I've got choices. Why would I buy from you? It is one of the most enlightening questions I ever ask salespeople, because the answers are so mundane and
Yeah,
pedestrian. It's like, oh, because we have great quality and we're number one in the industry and we've been around 50 years. I'm like, really? That's what
yeah,
you've got for me? What do you think
yeah,
those other three guys are going to say? They're going
yeah,
to say the
yeah.
same
I
thing.
I asked a team, a very small team of a firm a couple of months ago. I said, right, they kept on using this term USP, USP, as if it was, is this buzzword that they'd come across. And I said, okay, I'll humor you. What is your USP? And the response from one of them, and the second response wasn't much better, but it was our customer service.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, we're the
Yeah.
best.
They didn't even say that. They just went, "What's your USP?" Oh, our customer service. Well,
Oh, that's it.
yeah,
You have
yeah.
customer service?
You
Wow.
have. Yeah.
That's
Like, what is it
awesome.
about your customer service that your competitors aren't providing, if anything? And there
Yeah, if
wasn't
anything.
any. But
Right.
if
Right.
there had been, then maybe I'd have, there'd have been a conversation. But You're right. It's just this words out of a can, isn't it?
It's crazy. Let's transition a little bit. You talk a lot about advanced buyer psychology. You talk about the psychology of influence and buying and so forth. When you talk about those things, Robin, in a general sense, what are you referring to? Give us an example.
Yeah. I've done a lot of work on behavior. I trained as a therapist, right? So that's kind of where the name sales therapist kind of comes from. It's my infusion of using psychotherapeutic models and practices within a selling environment. And the reason for that, and I'll bore you with the backstory because I think it's important, is that I noticed when I went into being a therapist, I didn't want to do it long term, but I noticed that I was having these conversations where people were coming in with a problem. I was managing to use my skills to get them to really open up about that, tell me stuff that they probably have not told anyone else. I could make them feel heard and understood, but at the end of it, they would do a number of things. One, they would make a change. They would make a decision to change something about the
Yes.
way they
Yes.
operate. They would thank me for it as well. They would say, "Thank you, you've really, really helped me." And thirdly, that whole process felt so good for me and for them.
Right.
And it was then when it hit me, I was like, shouldn't that have been like what my sales conversations, because my sales conversations, they weren't making decisions, they were circling around in follow-up limbo. They certainly weren't thanking me. Instead, I was saying, "Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Prospect." And the whole thing felt dirty at best.
Right.
So I was like, there's a mismatch here. So this is where I looked at, if I can really understand the psychology behind how people open up, share information, become vulnerable, make decisions, commit to those decisions, and that whole, what we call that frame, the authority frame, was completely different. Now, there'll be some smart ass listening to this going, "Yeah, but it's not like they're in a therapy room." And like, yeah, but you can still shape that frame to be the person that has the authority and is guiding someone to influence them to make a good decision, ethical decision for their business, life, family, whatever you sell, and they can thank you for it. So this is where it all came from. So now I try to move away from the clinical lingo, but the principles are the same. It's like, what stops someone making a change? What stops someone resisting an idea? What's someone like I just did some content this week, a post which will be out in a couple of days, around my favorite sales movie. Um, what's your favorite sales movie, Kelly?
Inception.
Yeah, you got it. You
That's
got
my
it.
favorite.
Yeah, yeah. And why? You
Why?
bang on.
Because the idea is we need to implant this idea in your head without you thinking we planted it in your head. It's got to be your idea, and you've
Yeah,
got to build your emotional response around your thought process, and not me trying to shove it down your throat. I mean that takes some
you got it.
doing.
You got it. Yeah. So there'll be a bunch of guys who say, like, Wolf of Wall Street, Boiler Room, Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross. There'll be the sentimental types that say the pursuit of happiness or something like that. But you're absolutely right. If we're looking to influence someone to make a decision, Inception is a great case study. It's an awesome film. It's in my top five, but it's a great example of how to, we can't enter people's dreams, but the principles of how you get someone to make a decision that feels their own. Like, there's lots of cool sales advice hidden within that movie that a lot of people won't catch.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's interesting because psychology is one of those words I think, especially in the sales profession, where it immediately impacts people certain ways and they either turn it on or turn it off. For me personally, as a young sales guy, I was enamored with it because I'm a task driven guy. Give me a job, give me a project, I can do that. The problem is, I'm probably going to run over a bunch of people in the process. And I had no real understanding of that, no real cognizance of how I would impact somebody because you asked me to get a job done, Robin. I got
Yeah.
it done. I mean, who cares how it got done?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, bringing that into the sales world, early on, I was the guy that was features, advantages, benefits, information, data. You know, you and I thought I was going to be good at selling because I was a logical debater and I did very well in debate class and in
Yeah.
school. I thought, man,
Yeah.
I'm going to really crush this thing. Whew, that was a wake
Yeah.
up call. When you start
Yeah, yeah,
losing deals that you think you should win, right? And you can't figure out
yeah.
why.
So the best debater, and I think debate's a good example. The best debater, as we know it in history, was a guy called Socrates, right?
Yes.
Known as a philosopher. But there's transcriptions of him having public debates. I mean, he was executed for being so influential. Imagine that. Imagine being so dangerous because of the words you say that the state has you assassinated. Okay, that's so this guy is crazy persuasive. Guess what? Um, he didn't follow the ABCs of closing.
Right.
He wasn't using Bant. He
Right.
wasn't, selling features and benefits and doing any of this
Right.
kind of stuff that you'll find in the sales books. But what he was doing is he was asking questions that were getting people to unravel their own kind of thinking and come to their own conclusions. So
Right.
he never planted an idea in someone's head that wasn't already there. He just kind of watered and nurtured these innate desires, and that's dangerous, right? In a political landscape, to give people agency and freedom of thought. So yeah, there's so Socratic question, awesome framework, if you want to call it that, or
Sure.
field of philosophy and psychology. That's 100% plugged into like what I do. How can I just ask questions which kind of extract what's already going on? I don't need to tell you anything.
Right, exactly right. That's great stuff. Listen, stay with us. On the other side, we're going to come back. I want to delve into psychology as it relates to objections. This is something Robin does well. Stay with us. Risk is the word that people care about. Change is difficult. I'm going to be judged by this decision. I care about what my boss thinks, what the company's going to think. How am I going to justify the decision that I make? And you know what the easy decision to make is? What we've always done. It's already accepted, unless, of course, what we've always done is an unmitigated disaster. It's a train wreck and everybody knows it, and we have to change. But now, because I've got three choices, your competitors, to change, I've got to sort out which one makes the most sense with the least amount of risk. I get the most benefit, the best result, the best outcome with the least amount of risk. Welcome back, Sales Untraining. Thanks for joining the podcast again. Hope you'll like and subscribe to the podcast. More importantly, share it with somebody, because people need to be in on the conversation of how do we change the way we train salespeople to more predictably and consistently create successful salespeople in the field. Robin Burr is my guest. We're talking about influence, psychology, a lot of different things that are not very common topics when you're listening to sales podcasts. Hope you're enjoying it. But I wanted to transition just a little bit, Robin. And, there's this notion that goes around that people don't want to be sold. They want to buy. And I don't know. There's something about that doesn't hit me just right. And I'm wondering if it's just me. How does that hit you?
I think people want to make their own decisions.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to make their own decisions. So that I think that's where that's probably trying to head with that. That if I try to get you to do something, even if you think it's a good idea, you'll reject it more than if you have this idea yourself.
Right.
So whether you want to call that you're buying or I'm selling or whatever, it's irrelevant. It's like who is controlling the idea or who's controlling the action or the decision. A lot of salespeople try to, right?
Right.
Control the sale, we're told. You don't need to control the sale. If you cultivate the right environment, people will buy. It's a win-win, but they're doing it off their own back. So you get less grudge purchases and all that kind of stuff. So
And they feel more comfortable in the process too.
they feel more
Interestingly
comfortable,
enough.
and they'll take ownership, which I think is really, really important. If you're a service-based business, or if you're like me, that's a coach, right? So if someone buys with me, I'm working with them for 6 months. So I need to make sure that you're on board, that you're going to be accountable. I can't. I'm not going to just sell you something and then disappear.
Right.
So I think when I know that someone decides to go with me, I know that, okay, this isn't just a one-off decision. This is you're going to stick with this. And I think if you're in a service-based business, which has upselling opportunities or has got a long lifetime value, I think it's important that you get people who don't regret an initial decision because they were, you know, pressured into it.
Absolutely. We talk in the sales world since I started 100 years ago, objections have always been a topic, right? You have to learn how to handle those objections. And clearly, I think as you move into a phase where people are starting to think about making a change, making a decision in your favor, they've become influenced to move in your direction. There are times and opportunities where they're going to have objections.
Mm.
Are there is it fair to think about objections as good in some cases and bad in others? Are there good objections and bad objections? Are there objections that you would see salespeople get that you would say, you never should have gotten that one? That came because of the way you did this.
Yeah, but yes, yeah, I think there are definitely there's repeat offenders, right, that we could all list. That you know the common objections that we know are almost pre-installed in someone's brain. You know,
Right.
whether you cold call, you know that you're going to get some objection of I'm in a median, or you know I don't take cold calls, that kind of thing. But at the other end, closing deal, yeah, there's only a select few objections which will resurface. They'll come in different shapes and sizes, but they all have the same core, I think. Are there good objections? I mean, I think it's good to know, depending on the context. I think everything is contextual. That if someone comes up with a well-formed objection, a legitimate concern, which is the term I prefer to use. I prefer to use the term concern than objection.
Agreed.
Objection makes me think of, you know, in a courtroom, kind of very
Banging the
dramatic,
gavel.
very
Yes.
yeah, very combative. But concerns, if someone has a concern, and it's founded in truth and it's legitimate, I think we can sense those, and you should have no problem treating those as a concern. It's when people share a legitimate concern and the salesperson comes at it like it's an objection. Like I always say, people are probably not objecting as much as you think. If they're just sharing a hesitation or even just asking a question. You've seen this where customers will just ask an innocent question and the salesperson will treat it like an objection.
Yes.
And it, you know, so there's definitely that mismatch. I don't know. Yeah. So they're going to come up, they're going to be part of sales, but I don't think people are objecting as much as you think.
That's a
Yeah.
really good
At the
insight.
back end of a sales cycle, if you do everything right, you know.
Sure. Interesting to me. I think that when people talk about price objections, they categorize that as an objection. I've never looked at price, the concern about price. Your price is too high. I can buy it cheaper. I can get it, whatever. I've never looked at that as an objection. I look at that as some sort of negotiation tactic because one of the things I know is that I can absolutely love what you're selling me. I've already decided to buy it in my head, and I will still try to get a better price. So I don't see that so much as an objection as a tactic to get a better price, regardless of whether I like it or not. Is that fair? Would you look at it that way, or do you see it differently?
Um, I think there are people who just they play the game, you know, and they'll just they have every intention of going ahead, but they'll just try it on. And if you just say no in a better way than that to
Right.
just reducing your price, um, they'll probably just go. If you've done the job right, they'll probably just go, okay, well, I had to be seen to be asking.
Sure.
Which happens a lot in B2B selling. Is people ask for discounts just so they can say to their boss, um, I got 10% off and look good. But in reality, they're not ready to throw the deal away if the vendor says no. So, salespeople are desperate to get the deal. This is all to do with who needs the deal the most. Whoever needs to do the deal the most is going to be on a back foot. Is going to have
Yeah,
more work to do.
that's interesting you say that because I think, at least on some level, the salesperson always needs the deal
Needs the sell.
more than
Yeah.
anybody else, right? Because they've got to hit their
Yeah.
number and all that. And it does tend to come across in desperation, doesn't it? I mean, that's part of the
Well, it's
psychology.
tied to their identity. So if you're a salesperson, your career is based off of your number. Someone allocates a random freaking number, and that's what make you good, bad, or average, right? And you accept it, and you live and die by this arbitrary number. And if, of course, you don't meet that number, then your whole sense of identity and self-worth is attached to interactions. Now, there is not always a metric for what you're selling. And until you find that there is,
Right.
if you sell something like sales training, for example, and I feel you with 100% confidence that if you have my training, you as a VP of sales will exceed your quota, and that's what gets you the promotion. Now you look like the hero, and it's a battle of it's a battle of identity. This is where the psychology comes in. It's nothing to do with the training. It's nothing to do with the benefits of the training. It's who are we with or without these products or services, which is a level that will go over many people's heads. It's like, who am I if I continue to underdeliver on my sales targets? Whoever I'm talking, because I'm talking about selling to a sales ICP there, right? So
Right.
whoever it is. But in almost all circumstances, if a salespeople is measured on a number, then they're attaching their self-worth, their identity, and who they are as a person to their sales figure. Of course, it's going to show up in every conversation, that neediness to close the deal. As soon as you don't need to close the deal, selling becomes a lot easier. And I know that's just like a cute sound bite to throw out there. It's harder in practice, but as soon as you don't need the business anymore, you'll be surprised how easy it is to.
Oh, for sure. Well,
Yeah.
as a young man, I had a sales manager tell me one time, listen, do you know, he asked this question. He said, do you know when the best time is to make a sales call? I'm racking my brain. Is it in the morning? Is it after 5? Is it the lunch hour? And I said, well, I no, I guess I don't. He goes, right after you make a sale. That's the best time to make a sales call.
Yes.
Because like you said, I mean, it's like, okay, I already made one. This would be gravy. So suddenly the desperation falls away and I don't push. And, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Worst time to make a sales call, end of the month, you're 82% and you need to close that big
Yeah.
deal. Right. And now you're pushing and you're desperate. I experienced that firsthand. I had,
Yeah.
been a top sales guy in the field for a couple of years. Then I went into sales management and, corporate management. And then I started my own company back in the same area, territory. And I was the salesperson for my own company. And I started calling on people that, I'd known and they loved me, they loved our product, they loved our company. And I thought, man, if I show up, they're just going to be, hey, where have you been all this time? Let's get what you have to offer. Apparently, if you've been gone 4 or 5 years, it doesn't work that way. you know? So all of a sudden,
Was you not building relationships?
yeah, yeah. It's so suddenly, I'm like, wow, I've got to sustain this company, my company. People are depending on that, and you start to press
Mm.
instead of just going through the process. I mean, the psychology of influence is a huge deal. Talk briefly before we quit today about your objection handling approach. You've got kind of a framework that you use, and I know it's sort of got that foundation in psychology. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I call it the perfect framework, and it's a bit narcissistic in that sense. But I was mapping out the different areas of, and it's not a linear framework like say this and then say this and then say this, because I
Right.
think that sucks when you're dealing with people that have different objections, that have different reasons, contexts, and it's rife with all of the psychological baggage. But it's to prevent, explore, and reframe is the first thing. So how to prevent an objection from coming up in the first place. If someone does, you explore it. There may be, you may not use any or all of these parts, but to learn how to reframe, I think, is really important. So I learned that in therapy. It's just learning how to take someone's perspective and kind of just warp it slightly in an acceptable way so they can see that it's a bit different. And now that might sound very elementary, but a lot of people will just do it in a clunky way where
Right.
they'll just, it won't be much better than saying, well, don't look at it this way, look at it this way. You've got to be more nuanced than that. Um, there's facilitation, which is if you've got a logistical objection, and I call a logistical objection almost like a real objection that someone
Right.
has. So if someone says, I don't have the budget for this, guess what? It might actually be true. Budgets are a real thing. They are allocated. Can they get budget from elsewhere? Maybe. That's a conversation you need to facilitate. You can't just try to beat them up over value if they're sold. Okay. E is empathize. That's just to have the core of that whole conversation around empathy and understanding. C is to close. Now, the reason I put this in there is because I see loads of people learn objection handling to a really good level, but what they fail to do is that really important bit we spoke about influence is guiding the next decision. So they handle this objection, but they don't then actually give it the momentum to the last bit is to actually transition to whatever that next step is, which is to move forward with the deal. So that's it in a nutshell. But I think the really important bits is the prevention, how to explore, and how to reframe. Like if you can learn those as just 3 core objection handling skills, you will embrace objections and concerns rather than freeze at them, which is what a lot of people do. A lot of people freeze when objections come their way, even when they can tell they're on the way. They don't do anything to stop them. They just deer in headlights. And then the prospect hits them with the objection, and guess what? That slick line that they saw someone say on Instagram or they read in a LinkedIn post, yeah, that just falls away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Wow, that's fantastic. That's as good as anything I've ever heard in all of my career. In case you missed it, if you're watching or listening, PERFECT is an acronym, PERFECT, and he went through those 7 steps very succinctly. But that's fantastic, Robin. As always, my friend, great to talk to you. Good stuff, great insights. And again, make sure you find Robin on LinkedIn and follow his content. It will make you think, and it'll make you think in a good way. Thanks for joining me on Sales Untraining. I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.